So yeah, pretty much how this reaction team is going to go. You start with the Nuvolet E, that's going to proc Hydro on all the opponents there. Then you have two routes here. Buff combo wise, for one of the most optimal, you can do Beta EQ because Electrocharge will actually coexist with Hydro, allowing you to react both the elements at the same time. The main goal here is to proc the most Hydro reaction elements as soon as you can because of this guy's passive right here. The different Hydro reactions give you a big damage boost, so you need to do it. So pretty much really how it works here is you go coexist with Electro because those two elements can coexist, allowing for Electrocharge, also allowing you to have Electro on the enemy, going to Nikita to do Dendro. If you do Dendro with a Hydro Particle on first, then there's actually double the bloom product. So instead of one bloom, you get two. That's a weird thing because if you do Dendro to Hydro, it won't do that and it will only give you one. So doing this specific rotation also increases it more. And because this Dendro is a potent Dendro and it's coded as a 2 or 3 Dendro instead of a 1 Dendro, basically there's different potencies and that's what it is. You can think about like different layers. One reaction will use up one layer basically. And the way you do it does matter. So pretty much because this is a super potent Dendro, it will actually proc the Aggravate reaction with the Electro Dendro, and it will also create a bloom because the Hydro Dendro, because both of them live. That's super not super common. It's part of the reason Dendro is super good. It's because it's the only reaction that can really let you hold on to something with that level of potency and have that good effects. So the next thing there is a Pyro. The reason why is because it's also double reacting with Dendro. So the reactions that are really happening here going in order is that you are getting burning applied to the enemy, overload's going to also apply to the enemy and not interfere with the pyro, so it'll stay on the enemy, allowing you to keep your burning. Burning actually doubles your pyro, which is super interesting. So instead of 1, you get 2. Meaning, if you're doing something called forward vape, which is when you use Hydro into pyro, then what happens there is that it will do a 200% damage multiplier. Then there's backwards vape, which is usually what people use. The reason why they use it is because you get 2, so you can use 2 pyro and the Hydro will then go away. So it allows you to do good. The difference is it's 1.5 times the damage compared to 2 times the damage. So it turns out to about the equal amount, but a lot of times reverse vape is better because it goes from Hydro to pyro. It's just an interesting way that works there, but it's super important to note because that means these interactions aren't interfering with each other, and also because burning gives you 2, Nuvolet will over apply in Hydro, allowing it so you actually get double vapes in the system, meaning you're getting 200% bursts, which turns out to be a lot more damage compared to doing the other way because you're able to get the 2 instead of the 1. Which turns out to a gigantic damage increase. Then at the same time, the Burgeons are going to proc, and that's going to make an AoE, a Pyro and Dendro, which the Pyro then will also potentially enable the extra hits from Beta to trigger overloads, which will cause them to also then explode. During all this, there's also multiple dots happening, and it creates a gigantic spread in damage. Here's it in action. Okay, I'll try and break it down. Go here. Element still exists. I did it a bit slow, but if you do that fast enough, all the elements will still stick there. Then from here, go here, it's going to overload and start burning. Then if I hit E, it's still going, and then it's going to re-hit, and then it's going to do more vaporize. The Burgeons hit, and during all that, the Electro hits. So that's how it creates that, and you can do this in about 20 to 30 seconds with this, which is very good. The reason why it's super good is because the name of the game is how many reactions you can basically put out in once and how potent can those reactions be. So for a good example, one sec, I'll show you a good example of the opposite where you're going for specifically one reaction and you're trying to force proc it. Which means get it as consistently as you can just to keep doing it. So you're getting a lot of one strong reaction but slower. For the amount of actual actions I'm doing per second on the R1 and the amount of reactions that are happening, it's something like 10 to 12 in that instance we saw there. Here it's going to be 2. But look at how much more there is. So we go over here, we're heavily applying Hydro. We're doing this so we can get more Hydro on it. Oh, way over applied as you see there. There's an absolute ton. No matter how much pyro I do, there's always hydro. See? And as you see there, it completely nukes them, basically. The reason why is because this character on the charge stacks here, this Hu Tao's my favorite character. Mainly because this charge stack here, not just can you animation cancel it, so there's ways you can artificially or, you know, from a skill standpoint, increase your damage. It also has 0 ICD, which is internal cooldown, meaning no matter how much of the attack you do, it will always apply an element. You can only apply an element usually ever so often, but there's something where you can, I call it force procking it over. So for an example there, and as a good example of being able to do that, Hu Tao can force proc it because when you press her E and do a charge stack, it will always apply a pyro. Deha has 3 force procs in her E. The initial hit, the next hit you can do, and then the explosion. So that's 3 force pyro procs you can immediately do. This team is designed to be able to just infinitely fund it, and the reason Deha works here is because usually you have enough pyro that doesn't matter. Another cool thing you can do here is go Deha, this, and as you see here, it will get rid of that, but as soon as you retrigger it, and retrigger the explosion, you can absolutely nuke, because you're vaping on fucking Deha, which does a lot. As you see here, every hit I'm doing vapes. The reason that's important, that means I'm always getting that damage multiplier for free. That's kind of why it's important. You can tell how all those procs really can add up to a lot of damage, right?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a neat little thing you can do there to do a lot. Now there's force procking. Now here's an interesting thing that is very interesting. You'll notice there's a bunch of reactions and it's all front loaded on this team. So you can kind of tell when all the reactions happen, right? You can see all the effects and the explosions and how it like affects the enemies, right? So Raiden has 2 force procs. Kazuha can basically be used to extend it, and Nahida is very consistent with her Dendro. So we're kind of using Dendro as a base here. Now watch this. We do Raiden here. We're doing this. We're doing some force proc of swirls to group the enemies. This is so we can have more consistent mixture. Then from there, you can go in here and do Nahida. This allows for quicken. And then when you do this, you get aggravate, swirl, burgeon, and also overload. It's kind of hard to tell there. I call it Deha bombs because what it really does is it combines all the reactions that coincide and then explodes them. And as you see, all the time there was reactions during every single part of that thing. This is actually a team that technically shouldn't work because there's no real burst or driver in the team. Which usually that's where a lot of your damage comes from. You have to play towards a goal in the end, and usually the goal is consistent damage. Makes sense, right?
Yep.
So the cool thing about this is because of also how Raiden works, if it's any extended fight, you can switch to her and do a bunch of damage. And because Dea's on-fielding, you don't need to worry about healing because she auto-heals herself. So here's another way you can rotate it, where you do this here, Dea, and as you then go over here, you're applying overload right there. You can go to Nahida, apply this right here, and then do another jump. And they're burning, and as you saw, there was a lot of burning and overload happening the entire time in that reaction, compared to it all kind of being at one point. And it was like weirdly spread out. That's because the burning was there sooner with Kazuha. It does some interesting things with this burst, which extends the amount of pyro I was applying. So pretty much every time Raiden's E hit, it did it. Then as soon as I added on Nahida, then we were able to get some interactions that were just super, super strong. And really, it's about kind of cascading. And all of it scales a bit differently. Like, the main reason this team also works is because these two combined give you a gigantic EM buff, which increases your reaction damage. So that means you can have high reaction damage built for a character that increases your flat damage with Dendro, and then you can have multiplicative scaling. When you're able to combine that, it's very rare, but it's very strong. So it's kind of a cool little system.